Welcome back to Psycho Killer Shocking True Crime Stories, and the second part of our investigation into France's most infamous wife murderer, Henri Désiré Landru.
Last time, we introduced you to the man, a petty swindler turned cold-hearted killer, whose charm was matched only by his cruelty. We examined his methods, his motivations, and how he fits the mould of a classic psychopath.
In this episode, we turn the tables and meet the detective who refused to let Landru vanish into the fog of war. We'll follow the investigation step by step, sit through the jaw-dropping trial, and finally stand witness to the fall of the Bluebeard of Gambais.
This is where justice meets the guillotine. Let's get into it.
If Landru's crimes were horrifying, his trial was a masterpiece of macabre theatre. Held in Versailles in 1921, it gripped the nation like no other. Photographs of the court proceedings were permitted for the first time in French legal history. This wasn't just justice, it was spectacle.
Think about it. The defendant, the witnesses, the judge, even the jury, all photographed and published in newspapers across France. One day, readers were poring over accounts of trench warfare. The next, they were examining the steely gaze of Henri Landru as he sat in the dock, arms folded, dark eyes unblinking beneath his heavy eyebrows.
And the evidence? It wasn't just talked about, it was shown. The blackened cast iron stove, believed to be the crematorium where Landru incinerated his victims, was hauled into the courtroom. It became a grim centrepiece. There were also photographs of the villa in Gambais where the murders were believed to have taken place. Images of scorched bones, partially burned personal belongings, and scraps of clothing, all shown to the court and, soon enough, to the entire country.
It made for gripping headlines. The monster of Gambais, they called him. The modern Bluebeard. Papers competed for the most lurid coverage. One described the stove as the black mouth of hell itself. But amidst the spectacle, there was still the matter of justice.
Enter Maître Vincent di Mauro Giafferi, Landru's flamboyant, eloquent defence counsel. A legal celebrity in his own right, Mauro Giafferi didn't just defend Landru, he performed for him. He argued that no bodies had been conclusively identified, that there was no direct evidence of murder, only circumstantial links, and a suspicious trail of missing women.
It was, I suppose, bold, even brilliant, and for a while it worked. The jury reportedly deliberated for hours, torn between the absence of corpses and the overwhelming mountain of motive and testimony. But in the end, the verdict was unanimous. Henri Désiré Landru was found guilty of 11 murders, 10 women, and the teenage son of one of them.
The sentence? Death. And in 1922, that meant the guillotine.
They came for him early in the morning. It was February the 25th, 1922. Still dark, cold. The walls of Fresnay prison were silent. Landru, now 52, was woken just before dawn and told the news. The final appeal had failed. Clemency denied. The guillotine was ready.
According to witnesses, he remained eerily calm. Dressed in his usual dark suit, collar buttoned tight, beard neatly trimmed, he looked more like a stern professor than a mass murderer. When asked if he had any last words, he allegedly said, "Je suis innocent. I am innocent." Not a flicker of fear.
They marched him through the corridor, the guards flanking him. Outside, the executioner, Anatole Deibler, waited. Deibler was a grim celebrity in his own right, the man who'd sent hundreds to the blade. He moved quickly, efficiently.
Landru was strapped to the bascule, the tilting plank that positioned the condemned under the blade. His neck was exposed. The crowd gathered in the pre-dawn gloom. Some said they could smell the blood even before it spilt. Others said the silence before the blade fell was absolute.
And then the blade dropped. A flash of steel, a muffled thump, and it was over. The head rolled into the waiting basket, the body slumped. Henri Désiré Landru, Bluebeard of Gambais, seducer, killer, thief, was dead.
But the legend was only just beginning. His trial had been so well documented, so widely photographed and reported, that Landru entered the collective consciousness like a mythic figure. People bought postcards of the courtroom, the oven, even Landru himself.
And in a way, he became France's first modern celebrity killer. Not just for what he did, but for how it was presented. Justice wasn't just done here, it was performed.
Which makes us ask, have we really changed? Or are we still obsessed with packaging evil for public consumption, just with better cameras and faster headlines? And dare I say it, podcasts. We've walked you through the crimes, the victims, the court, and the guillotine. But here at Psycho Killer Shocking True Crime Stories, we like to go one step further. We want to ask, what kind of mind commits such acts?
So let's break out the scalpel. The Hare Psychopathy Checklist Revised, or the PCLR. It's the gold standard for evaluating psychopathy. It's a clinical tool used by psychologists to assess whether someone ticks the boxes for being a full-blown psychopath.
Developed by Dr. Robert Hare, the checklist includes 20 personality traits and behaviours, each scored from 0 to 2, with a maximum score of 40. A score of 25 or above is considered clinically psychopathic in North America. In Europe, it's often 30. So, where does Henri Désiré Landru fall? So, factor 1, interpersonal and affective traits. Number 1, glibness and superficial charm. Landru was a master manipulator. Posing as a retired businessman or aristocrat, he charmed vulnerable women into trusting him, often within a matter of days. We'll give him 2.
Number 2, grandiose sense of self-worth. He fancied himself untouchable, above the law. His courtroom posture, cold, arrogant, amused. We'll give him 2.
Number 3, pathological lying. Multiple aliases, multiple fake occupations, multiple stories, lies rolled off his tongue like poetry. That's got to be 2.
Number 4, cunning and manipulative. Well, he systematically targeted lonely women, often war widows, lured them with promises of marriage, and then, well, we know what came next. Yep, we'll score him 2.
Number 5, lack of remorse or guilt. At no point, not during the trial, nor even facing the guillotine, did he express remorse. Not a flicker. That's 2.
Number 6, shallow affect. Well, he was emotionally cold. He performed roles convincingly, but there's no evidence of an authentic emotional connection. Yeah, we'll score him just 1 for that.
Number 7, callous and a lack of empathy. 11 human beings, including a teenage boy, were murdered and burned. He didn't even blink. That's 2.
Number 8, failure to accept responsibility. Well, he maintained his innocence to the end. He blamed the missing women on coincidence, confusion, or their own poor choices. Yep, we'll score him 2 for that.
So the subtotal for factor 1, interpersonal and affective traits, I've got down here 15 out of 16. Over to you, Jack.
Factor 2 is lifestyle and antisocial traits. Number 9, the need for stimulation and proneness to boredom. Whilst not thrill-seeking in a reckless sense, Landru lived a secret double life, perhaps for the intellectual stimulation. Let's score him 1 for that.
Okay, number 10, parasitic lifestyle. Once he began his scheme, he never worked an honest day. He lived off his victims' savings, jewellery and property. If we could score him higher on this one, we would, but we can only give him 2.
Number 11. Poor behavioural controls. Not overtly violent in public, but chillingly impulsive in private, with fatal consequences. We'll give him 1 for that.
Okay, early behavioural problems, that's number 12 on the list. Some reports suggest petty theft and fraud in his youth, though documentation is sparse, so we can only really give him 1.
Number 13. Lack of realistic long-term goals. Well, his plans involved serial seduction and murder. That's not exactly a stable retirement strategy, is it? We'll score him just the 1, though.
Number 14. Impulsivity. He acted swiftly, meet, seduce, marry, kill, often within weeks. I'd say 1.
Number 15. Irresponsibility. Well, he left behind multiple ruined lives, including his own family, who he continued to deceive. Yeah, we'll score him 2 there.
And number 16. Failure to accept responsibility for his own actions. That's a duplicate, it's already scored, so let's look at the subtotal for that section. I'm getting 9 out of 12. Do you concur with that, Jack?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so finally, additional antisocial traits on the Hare checklist. We're up to number 17, juvenile delinquency. There's limited evidence of this, but early shady dealings hinted at a long-standing disregard for social norms. Let's say 1.
Number 18. Revocation of conditional release. And this is often a difficult one to assess. We know that he wasn't imprisoned and released. He simply evaded the law for years, so we can't score him anything there.
That's a 0. Number 19. Criminal versatility, fraud, identity theft, forgery, bigamy, serial murder, and the list goes on, doesn't it? He was a one-man crime wave, this chap. Criminal versatility, 2.
Number 20. Promiscuous sexual behaviour. Well, he wasn't promiscuous in the casual sense, but his seductions were instrumental, cold and manipulative. I think we can only score him 1 there.
Okay, so the subtotal for the additional social traits, 4 out of 6, which, if my arithmetic is up to snuff, gives us a total score for Henri Désiré Landru of 28 out of 40 on the Hare Shorter Psychopathy checklist.
So whatever mechanism you choose, and by modern clinical standards, Henri Désiré Landru qualifies as a psychopath.
A cold, manipulative predator who used charm as his weapon. No remorse, no empathy, no soul. And when he finally met the blade, he left only smoke, ash, and photographs of evil behind.
He may not have had the bloodlust of a Jack the Ripper or the sadism of a Chikatilo, but he had something just as terrifying, calculated evil, the kind you don't see coming.
And that, dear listeners, is what makes Henri Désiré Landru a psycho killer.
And there you have it, Henri Désiré Landru, manipulative, remorseless, cold-blooded, and every inch the archetype of a clinical psychopath, a monster hiding in plain sight, who almost got away with it.
We've just dissected the psychological profile of Henri Landru, a man who cooked his victims in an oven and then smiled at the press. But here's the thing, the horror didn't end with his execution. Landru lives on, in fiction, cinema, and a nation's collective psyche.
Landru wasn't just a criminal, he became a myth, and myths are powerful. They warp the culture around them. They seep into storytelling, politics, and law.
First, let's talk fiction. If Landru feels eerily familiar, it's because he's been reincarnated over and over again in popular culture. He was the template for the suave, well-dressed killer who hides his monstrous nature beneath charm and intellect.
Georges Simenon's early detective fiction bore the trace of Landru's ghost. More directly, Charlie Chaplin based his 1947 black comedy Monsieur Verdoux on Landru, transforming him into a satirical character who murders wealthy widows to support his family during economic downturns. Dark, clever, and terrifyingly real.
And let's not forget Hitchcock. Though he never tackled Landru directly, you can see his fingerprints in characters like Norman Bates and Uncle Charlie in Shadow of a Doubt, cold sociopaths hiding in plain sight.
Fast forward to Hannibal Lecter, Tom Ripley, Joe Goldberg, all Landru's spiritual descendants, sophisticated killers who don't need brute force. They just need a dinner jacket, a believable backstory, and a persuasive smile.
In France, Landru became an icon of macabre cinema. Claude Chabrol, one of the French New Wave's greatest directors, brought Landru back to life in the 1963 film Landru. It's not a slasher, it's a bourgeois nightmare, polite, chilling, and steeped in moral ambiguity.
Chabrol's Landru isn't a raving lunatic. He's the embodiment of middle-class respectability gone rotten. The horror is how ordinary he seems. That was the point. France's real-life monster didn't lurk in the shadows. He was shopping for pastry with you in Paris.
But Landru's influence wasn't just artistic, it was legal. His trial marked a turning point in French judicial history. For the first time, the media was let into the courtroom in a big way. Photographs of Landru, the judge, the witnesses, and even that infamous oven were published in newspapers around the globe.
This ushered in an era of sensationalised justice. True crime became a public spectacle. The Landru case showed how justice could be both performed and consumed. It created a public appetite for gory details and villainous personalities.
It also forced the courts to consider how justice looked, not just how it worked. Judges became more aware of optics. Defence teams like Landru's famous lawyer, Maître di Mauro Giaferi, had to play to both the jury and the public gallery. It was no longer just about truth, it was about theatre.
Socially, though, Landru's crimes sparked panic and paranoia, but not just about murder. They were entangled with gender politics, post-war grief, and class anxiety.
The women he killed were mainly middle-aged widows made vulnerable by World War I. His case reinforced fears that independent, unchaperoned women were, dare I say, asking for it, feeding into misogynistic tropes that still echo today.
And the press dubbed him the Bluebeard of Gambais, invoking the fairy tale of the rich man who murdered his wives. The fairy tale became real, and in doing so, it cemented the idea of the seductive killer as a malevolent seducer, and the women as naive, even complicit.
Why does Henri Landru still matter in 2025? Because the issues he embodied, media exploitation, gender violence, psychological manipulation, performative justice, haven't gone away. If anything, they've intensified.
He was the prototype, a domestic terrorist in a three-piece suit, the killer you'd invite to tea.
And even now, a century later, Henri Désiré Landru reminds us that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a gentleman.
And that, friends, is the true horror.
Before we move on to Landru's criminal career, we have to ask the question that lurks behind every case we explore. Why? Why did Henri Désiré Landru become a remorseless seducer and murderer of women? Was he born evil? Or was evil shaped into him, one cruel lesson at a time?
Well, it's not like he sprang from the womb with a meat cleaver, is it? If we want to understand what made Landru tick, we've got to look at what made Landru.
He was born in 1869 in a working-class Paris suburb. His father was a metal worker, strict, old school, reportedly a disciplinarian. Landru's home life was hard, austere, and in that era that often meant the Catholic Church played an outsized role in a child's development.
That's right, and like many French boys, he attended a Catholic school, an environment that was known for strict moral instruction. But also, let's not sugarcoat it, harsh punishments and emotional repression, guilt, sin and silence. Those were the pillars of discipline.
He was described as a quiet, intelligent child. Some said too intelligent. He was solitary, introverted. Even as a young man, he struggled to connect emotionally. At school, he was a model student, but with few friends. His intelligence won him a scholarship to a seminary, where he briefly trained for the priesthood. Yep, you heard it right. Henri Landru once wanted to be a priest.
And there it is, from a would-be man of God to a mass murderer. It's not a straight line, but it's a chilling one. He learned how to perform virtue, how to conceal real feelings behind ritual and role play. That might have been the perfect primer for the lies he told later, posing as a retired officer, a widower, a man of means.
There's also the question of sexual repression. In the moral climate of the time, especially under the gaze of the church, sex was sinful, desire was dangerous, especially outside of marriage. But Landru developed a reputation as an obsessive seducer. Could this violent conquest of women later in life be a warped expression of desire twisted by shame?
Could be. There's also something we've seen in other killers, a kind of deep resentment towards women. Maybe it started with one failed love affair, or a mother who was emotionally distant, or simply an inability to control his impulses. Whatever the origin, it fermented in silence.
So, by the time he hit adulthood, Landru was already living a double life. On the surface, a respectable clerk. Beneath that, a man who forged checks, lied compulsively, and would soon graduate to much worse. Was he evil, though? Maybe. But was he shaped by family, by faith, and by a society that demanded appearances at all costs?
In short, he was a monster that France helped to make.
So, there you have it, the twisted story of Henri Désiré Landru, seducer, conman, murderer, and perhaps France's most notorious domestic serial killer. He preyed on women left vulnerable by war, used charm as a weapon, and fire to erase the evidence.
Landru wasn't a maniac with a knife in the shadows. He wore a tie, carried a walking cane, and spoke of marriage. He was the polite horror at the dinner table, which made him all the more terrifying.
His crimes gripped a nation, not just because of their cruelty, but because they exposed something deeper, about class, about gender, about how easy it is to be fooled by appearances.
And the camera never blinked. Courtroom photographs, front page headlines, the infamous oven, it all played out in public, setting the template for the true crime media circus that we know today.
Special thanks to the archivists, the historians and the journalists whose work helped us tell this story. You heard excerpts from serial killer documentary Henri Landru, the French Bluebeard. That's available on YouTube via the Old Time Crimes channel. And historical analysis by Richard Tomlinson from World War I era France's serial killer Henri Landru. If you'd like to explore them further, they're also listed in the show notes and on our website, psycho-killer.co.
And if you like what we do, subscribe, leave us a review, and tell a friend. Until next time, don't trust charming strangers. You never know what they're hiding.
Psycho Killer isn't just storytelling, it's an excavation. If you believe true crime should be smart, sharp, and just the right side of shocking, back us on Patreon and help us dig up the next case.
We'll see you again soon on the dark side for more psycho killer, shocking true crime stories.